Okay, here we are at the 1952 Singer 1591. This is the machine my father gave me. I've used it for quilting. I also had wanted it because the 15s have a slightly higher clearance, and this is good for knitting. But at the same time, the motor is 66 years old, and I wanted an alternative. I don't really want to get rid of the machine. Over the past 27 years or so with my sewing, I tend to prefer hand cranks and treadles, but now with my leg injury, I'm looking more at electrics, and yet I still like hand cranks. So another advantage to a full-size Singer bed like this, and in particular, the 15s, the 201s, I think were engineered just a little bit more finely than, say, the 99s, the Spartans, the 237s. These were the top of the line machines. And so that just a little bit more detailed engineering gives these machines a little bit of an edge over the other machines. The Singer 500A would also be, in my opinion, in that category. But in addition, they're full-size bed, so I can use the circular stitcher attachment with any width circle. I can use any of the zigzag attachments I have, but I can also use a new generic flower foot to make the circles this makes are about 1.5 inches in 1.5 inches across. So on my smaller 3, 4, 5-inch square quilts, I could still put circles on by using this. And I can't make flower shapes with this. I would need the zigzag of a 237 or a different machine, because you can't attach the flower foot with the zigzagger. They interfere with each other. But I can make straight stitch circles. And then there's also just the value that my father gave me the machine. Now, I told a story on Treadle On that my father was very innovative. He used to rebuild Willys Jeeps, and you never knew what he was going to come up with, especially if he didn't have a machine shop to make a part. So this, being a brand new made in America hand crank on a 1591, actually suits this machine very well. I have the hand crank installed. I did have the tabs a little bit more toward 11 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock when I installed it. So here we go. And again, it's 1 stitch per turn, but it doesn't seem to be bothering me. So now, because of that clutch washer, I believe, you have to hold the hand wheel still and turn the hand crank toward the back. Take the hand crank right off. Leave the clutch knob as it is. And put your foot on your trusty vintage Singer foot pedal. Is there anything prettier than that? So by just keeping this very small attachment right here in with the manual, I can go from a hand crank to a motor 1591 in like 2 seconds. So I think, again, I do think this hand crank was worth the money. There are a couple of drawbacks where you get 1 stitch per turn, and you would have to get used to it turning forward instead of backward. But let's say, there's bad weather everywhere right now, a hurricane going on down south. We get hurricanes all the time up here. If the power is going to go out, and I'm in the middle of making a quilt, I could just throw that hand crank on there and finish the quilt while the power was out. And I think that is why the man developed it this way. I can't do that because never mind. I think that's why he developed it this way. Maybe only for power outages. I want to keep this machine. I want to keep it in the bentwood case. It is very heavy, but if I keep it in one place, I don't have to move it around. And because of my leg injury and the wheelchair issue, I can either use the motor or not use the motor depending on what kind of day I have. I have epilepsy, and a lot of times I'll have a seizure and then forget what I was doing. Well, in a way, the 1591 is somewhat of an intimidating machine for me because it goes so fast. This solves that problem. I can recover from a seizure by hand cranking. So it's a win-win. It's a little bit different from the current way that people would put a hand crank on a sewing machine. It's the first hand crank I've seen that would work on a 1591. So it's the Bishop Sewing Systems hand crank on a 1952 1591.